Reclaimers, report for duty.
Rogue Core. A game I was lucky enough to get in the closed alpha of, and despite how early of a state it's in, I've had an absolute blast playing and may just end up being the best co-op-centered roguelike game, at least when it goes public. Which, yeah, I should mention this is a closed alpha, so a lot of what I talk about is highly subject to change. This was originally an expansion for Deep Rock Galactic that then got turned into its own standalone game. Much like DRG, it's a co-op, dwarf-based, class-based shooter featuring procedurally generated maps and fully destructible terrain. And for those unfamiliar with DRG, it's probably the best co-op game on the market, and yes, I really mean that. There seems to be a lot of overlap between the fanbase of DRG and TF2, because it is definitely one of the main inspirations behind the game. I mean, half the classes are named after TF2 ones. It's fun, casual, sometimes chaotic, and equally dumb game about going on cool mining adventures on an alien planet while shooting bugs with big guns. DRG Corporation has even found greater riches closer to the core of Hoxie's, and... it went wrong. Really wrong. Suddenly, and without warning, communications to the deep dig sites went dark. Management are calling it the Greyout. This isn't anything like the threats on the outer layer of Hoxes. You're not facing wildlife. This is something that wants you out. The regular dwarves won't cut it, so management instead sends in their special elite, the Reclaimers. The barrier disables most of the company tech upon contact, so you're sent in with almost nothing, and need to gather weapons, equipment, and upgrades from within. This is the main way the game differs from DRG. In that game, your power level remained the same throughout the course of a mission. In Rogue Core, you start out weak and grow strong. It's the same appeal other roguelites have, but the unique twist this game puts on the genre is that it carries over the heavy focus on co-op that DRG does. For those unaware, Deep Rock Galactic has a reputation for being one of the least toxic multiplayer games in existence. Randoms are just genuinely nice 99% of the time, and you go try play Overwatch and... sure, a game like Risk of Rain 2 can be played in co-op, but oftentimes it's just that you have other players there. You don't really need to work as a super cohesive team. You may get one guy hoard all the items or another forget to collect them and fall behind, and then you get me who somehow always ends up with the Bethnic Bloom. I'm sorry, I don't keep finding it, it keeps finding me! In Rogue Core, the process of upgrading and getting stronger is always a team effort. You collect Expedite, deposit it into the REPD, or Ellis, then take turns picking what upgrade you want. And this works way better than you'd think, even with randoms. Every time this happens, it cycles between who gets the first turn, and you can see everyone else's cursor as well as them being able to mark which one they want with a heart before it's their turn. You can see what the other players are thinking, and you're consciously thinking about what not only you want, but what the other players want as well. I call it enforced empathy. You're not just trying to power build as an individual, but as a team. There's also bio boosters and workbenches. Once unlocked, they offer upgrades specific to what class you're playing or what weapons you have, so they aren't shared with the other players. But even this is a team effort, as it doesn't matter who unlocked it. Everyone gets to benefit from the upgrades, and even the act of unlocking them can be done as a team. You could guard a player hacking a bio booster or help carry the toolbox to the workbench. Compared to DRG, this game has a much more strict pace. In that game, the more nitro you collected, the more resupplies you could call, and the longer you could stay in a mission. In Rogue Core, you have to collect as much Expedite as you can before the threat timer goes critical and you're forced to leave. I am a big sucker for big scary timer mechanics in games. The game is much more about time management, as you collect resources and get more powerful while managing when waves will occur. Some events trigger waves, which can stack on top of the timed ones, so you don't want to trigger both at once. But completing them successfully rewards you with a large chunk of Expedite for upgrades. And you'll want these upgrades to fight the core spawn. In DRG, the Glyphids would just walk towards you in a straight line, but the core spawn like to strafe and jump around. They're a lot smarter and more agile than the Glyphids. Almost every enemy type in this game is completely new, with only a couple returning from DRG. You have a variant of the bulk detonator, but it's always an optional encounter, so it's not always really as scary. But then you have
Leech! The leech is back! You know how much I love leeches? They're great! These things are my nemesis! I had my very first run single-handedly ended by a leech!
some of the sound design of the enemies is really good and makes them feel like creepy spawns of hell, but some is clearly not there yet. More on that later. But then we have the Reclaimer classes themselves. There's currently 4, but unlike DRG, there are plans to have more. But let's have an overview of what we have so far. Easily my favorite of the bunch, and in my opinion the most well designed. His ability is a big green energy sword that cuts straight through the middle of the screen, doing massive damage and even cutting into terrain, turning it into glass, which is both super cool and, honestly, kind of terrifying. This is genuinely one of the most dangerous feeling melee attacks I've ever used in a first-person shooter. And like with the other class abilities, has practically no startup lag if you hit Q and mouse button fast enough. There's no limit to the number of enemies the attack can hit, so it makes large groups of weaker enemies cry. And since it can't friendly fire, it's also great for clearing groups off of other players. The act of lining up enemies in the middle of your screen is really engaging. Either you quickly react to an opportunity, or you could set it up by kiting enemies into a group, or using the IFG or lure to clump them up. And since it counts as a melee attack, any upgrade revolving around melee pairs really well with the class. And in multiplayer is always given to the slicer. My only suggestion is that the glass that appears when you cut terrain could start out as red hot to sell the effect even further, but all around, really solid. Right now the least intuitive class by far, but actually really good once understood. Basically, you can send out this Falcon drone that I like to call Jared for some reason. Jared will search the area looking for things to attack. You can point it in the general direction you want it to search, or recall it back to you to recharge. They'll also recall themselves if they can't find anything. I found its biggest strength is that it simply automatically finds targets, including ones you didn't even notice. This makes it especially good at killing cave leeches. It's a cave leech homing missile that you can send out into any room you enter for the first time. Its attack also deals shock and a bit of slowdown, making it also good for support in combat, especially with how fast it is. Oh yeah, and the most important bit of all, you can pet the bird. This is very important to gameplay. Simple on the surface, but way more fun than I expected. You shoot bolts either directly at enemies or on the ground to create a radius, and anything affected will be tagged with 100% additional crit chance. This obviously enables the entire team to do way more damage to select targets and is very powerful, but crit chance works in a weird way in this game. Crit chance can actually go past 100%, which seems pointless, but the game doesn't explain that it will actually re-roll for another crit if you have more than 100%. So you could crit twice, or be at 250%, always crit twice, and have the chance for a third. You see, that's such a tongue twister. I've tried 20 times to say this. I can't say that part of the sentence. I give up, I'm just leaving this in. There's also a bit of a lack of feedback when landing a crit. More of a sound effect could be added. It also seems weird that it lasts less time when hitting an enemy directly than just shooting a wall, which can affect multiple targets. But it is overall really fun. It's great to select a specific enemy and mark it for death. Bro, what? This guy actually has 2 abilities that share a cooldown, so you have to use even more of your brain. The first is a shotgun hand blast thing that does moderate damage and has a chance to stun, abruptly stopping enemies in their tracks. It consumes 1 charge and honestly feels like using some sort of force blast on your enemies. It's really cool. His second ability slowly consumes your remaining charges and creates a fair radius around you that forces enemies to back off. This essentially makes you and anyone near you immune to close-ranged attacks while it's active, but long-range projectiles are still a problem. While not only being great for protection and as a "please go away or I will file a restraining order" move, it also makes Guardian really good at clutch revives since they can force enemies off of a downed player. In general, Guardian seems to be all about disrupting enemy movement near him and dealing with crowds. His bio booster upgrades also lean into this. And that's a brief overview of all 4 classes currently in the game. I like them all, but let's go over some of my criticisms with the game so far. Now, obviously, this game is an alpha, so things like jank, placeholder stuff, and unfinished or missing features are to be expected. A lot of this pertains to the overall gameplay. First off, the enemies. While I do like them in general, some of the sound design is a bit lacking, which obviously Ghost Ship intend to work on since the sound design of DRG is so good. But it would also likely help if some of the more chaotic enemy types could be spawned outside of swarms more often if the game plans on spawning them. Most of the time outside of swarms, you're being attacked by Shadowclaws, Creepers, and Stationaries. But you're in the middle of a chaotic swarm and suddenly Rafghans show up. And they are such chaotic enemies that push you around, and you just aren't prepared for them, especially if it's your first encounter. You could have the game spawn in a few between waves just to let the player learn their attacks easier and foreshadow them appearing in swarms for this mission. And while I don't mind the game being harder than DRG, it can get really brutal sometimes even in the first stage. It doesn't help that playing alone is far easier than co-op, just because of how much the game scales up with player count. But co-op is where the game is at its most interesting. Finding games can also be annoying, but I already talked about that on the second channel. While I haven't encountered issues fighting over upgrades with randoms, you do sometimes have that one player who forgets to go in the upgrade zone and then other players leave while you wait for them to arrive. It may help to make the zone a bit bigger to give you room to move around while not leaving other players waiting awkwardly. Speaking of the upgrades, a lot of them don't synergize super well with class abilities except for Slicer. It'd be nice if there were more upgrades that were very clearly good for certain classes. You could even give tags to certain upgrades in the code that make them only appear in the pool if specific classes are present, like how Team Link upgrades don't appear in single player. Some of the upgrades are also a bit hit or miss. Some like Better Red Sugar are just super good, but there's also a lot of upgrades that revolve around being hit, which basically rely on you sucking at the game. I want upgrades, not band-aids for my skill issue. The caves are also somewhat predictable. It's always just 3 or so large rooms each stage, connected by small tunnels. It's obviously like this because it works well with the gameplay, but there could be more types of structures to add variety to the navigation. Imagine if you had a chance of getting a large open point extraction style cave where almost the entire stage took place in one area, or like a sabotage mission with 3 paths branching off from a central room, with you starting in one of those paths and needing to explore the other 2. Or you could have a maze like Deep Scan Cave. Just kidding, that one would actually be a bad idea considering the game's faster pace. But it would be engaging to have the chance of different types of caves appear on a stage, and then figuring out which one you got and how to explore it. Perhaps the less linear ones could only appear on higher difficulties. But that's mainly what I have to criticize for now. A lot of DRG players are worried that it's not like DRG, but that's literally why it's a standalone game. People keep insisting that it should have been an expansion to DRG, but that just feels very ignorant. Them making it a separate game allowed them to be free of the rules of DRG and add all these cool new things that they wouldn't have otherwise. The design of DRG's gameplay entirely revolves around the 4 classes. Adding or removing any of them would completely ruin pretty much everything. But that's not the case in Rogue Core. Replacing the classes and even having more than 4 of them is fair game here.
Well, why don't they just develop it inside of DRG and let us switch?
Because 1, separating it into its own project makes the devs able to work on it without having to worry about accidentally breaking the main game in the process, which would have massively increased development time. And 2, because it means the game isn't gated behind owning DRG. The game isn't trying to just please DRG fans, and while there's some overlap in the target audience, it's not trying to be one-to-one, and there'll also be people who don't really vibe with DRG that will vibe with this game. At least when it comes into early access. For now, it's still a closed alpha. On that note, Deep Rock Galactic is in fact a game that is not an alpha and can be purchased and played and is a very good game. If you want to see me make a video on that game, let me know with a like, comment, and maybe, I don't know, there's also the subscribe button or whatever it is. But seriously, thanks for watching. It's nice to take a break from doing just TF2 stuff because I want to make videos I have fun making. If you're one of my TF2 fans and watch this to the end, I'm grateful. And to the people at Ghost Ship Games who will inevitably find this video, I hope this makes your day.